Now, before we look at Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, what I want to do, I want to go back and I want to see what Jesus says about money, because I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but Jesus talked more about money than he talked about any other subject. He did. 2 out of 3 stories that Jesus told dealt with how we handle money, how we handle our stuff. And he talked about it more than heaven or hell. You know why? Because we think about money more than we think about heaven or hell, right? Unless, of course, you have the credit companies. I better. What's going on here, Mike? Nope, we're still good. All right. Sounded weird for a second. Okay, so he talks about heaven or hell because we're more confronted by, let me back up, start that all over again. I have a big issue going on I'm dealing with. We have one of our young ladies is threatened suicide. We're dealing with that as we're getting started here, so my brain's somewhere else at the moment. Go all the way back, reset. Okay, so he talks about money more than he talks about heaven or hell because, quite honestly, we think about money more often. And it tends to obsess us more. And so what we want to do, we spend all of our time, rather than thinking about what God wants for us, we think about how we're going to get money, how we're going to keep money, how we're going to spend money, how we're going to save money, how we're going to invest money, what happens if we lose money. And so it kind of dominates us and we're consumed by it. Now, in Matthew 25, Jesus talks about a wealthy man. He tells this story that I love. He tells the story about a wealthy man. And the wealthy man calls in his servants and he says, look, I'm going on a big trip, and so I'm going to give you all of my stuff to look out for while I'm gone. Now, in those days, even though I know our English translations will talk about a bank, that kind of changes the context a little bit. In those days, there wasn't any such thing as a bank. So if you had money, you had it at your house. So this wealthy guy who's going on this long trip actually physically has all the money there that he's going to give them. He's not writing them a check or giving them plastic, okay? He's having them take over right there, and he divides up this money that he has between 3 different servants, and he says to them, I expect you guys to make the most of this, do something with this on my behalf, treat it just like I would treat it while I'm gone, and then when I get back, I'm going to want an accounting for it. Now, 2 of the guys, when the boss comes back, 2 of the guys, they have good reports about investing the boss's money. One of the guys, however, has a bad report about investing the money. And Jesus takes the story and he pulls out some financial laws for us. I mean, some foundations for how to have a healthy financial situation and how to make those decisions. Now, like I said before, man, if you're ever going to take notes in a lesson, take notes in this one today. All right? So follow with me on this stuff. These are foundations for the stability of your financial life and your spiritual life. Because understand this, Scripture very closely connects your spiritual life with how you handle your financial life. So you can't have your financial life be in total chaos and not think it does not affect your spiritual life at all. Right? They're very much linked together. So here we go. Let's dive in here. Matthew chapter 25. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like this. Once there was a man who was about to leave home on a trip. He called, circle this word. Whose servants is he calling? His. Circle his. All right. So he called his servants and put them in charge of whose stuff? His. Circle his again. Now, let's go back and review that real quick. We're talking about money here, but whose money are we talking about? His. We're not talking about the servant's money, right? We're talking about the master's money that he is giving them to take care of. Now, we call that stewardship. He's making them stewards. Their care of that money is stewardship. All right? Now, stewardship or being a steward, that's an old English term. It's an old English word, and it means to be the manager of. So just an old English word for a manager. So any of you who are involved in management at your work, even in a supervisory capacity, you are stewards of your work. And all through the Bible, God calls for us to be stewards or managers of our time, our energies, our resources, all of those things. God calls us to manage all of that. Now it says, he called his servants and put them in charge of his property. Here's the first law of the law of possession. All right? Everything I have belongs to who? God. And we've got to settle that one right up front. It's not my money. It's not my stuff. It all belongs to God. Now you say, but wait a minute. I worked my butt off for all this stuff. Who gave you your butt to work it off, right? Who gave that to you to work off? Who gave you the health to work it off? Who gave you the intellect to work it off, right? That all comes from God. Everything we have from God is a gift. We don't really own anything in life. You think you own your health? Wait till you hit 50. Yeah, then you start paying your health back out on the installment plan, just a little bit at a time till it's all gone, right? Okay. See, everything we've got is on loan to us from God. Now, it's true, you and I, we get to use it while we're here, but it's God's money. And the truth is, God loaned it to someone else before we got it. And when we're gone, guess what he's going to do? Our kids are going to fight over it, and someone else is going to get it, right? He's going to loan it to somebody else. See, it's just under our management at this point. We're only stewards of it. Now, that's really important. And I hit that kind of hard because we forget that. You want to know how you want to know how you know when you've forgotten that it all belongs to God? You start worrying about it. When you start worrying about it, that's the sign that you think you own it, that it's all yours. Verse 15. He gave to each one, how? According to his ability. To one he gave 5,000 gold coins. To another he gave 2,000. To another he gave 1,000. Then he left on his trip. Now, let me clarify something with this just a little bit here. Some of you know the older English version of this story. Remember what we call that? What we call this under the older English stuff? We call this the parable of the talents. He gives 5 talents to one guy, 2 talents to one guy, and then 1 talent to one guy. Now, that really messes us up because we try to take it and make it talents, like my talent of singing. Okay? Yeah. Or, my talent at art, which is just only slightly above my talent at singing, And so we try to make it into abilities. No, talent, it's an English word, but it's not English in the sense the Bible uses it. It's actually a Latin form of measurement. It was a Roman form of measurement. So a talent was an ability you had. So don't take it and make it about your abilities. You can apply it toward your abilities, but we're not talking about your abilities. A talent was actually a measurement of money. It was a weight of money. And a Roman talent was, get this, 71 pounds of gold. Whee doggies. Yeah, 71 pounds of gold. The current gold price this week was $1,750 an ounce. So that means if you've got 1 talent of gold, you've got nearly $2 million. All right, now, doesn't the story take a little different look now? Yeah, and not just leaving them a little bit of stuff. If you've got 2 talents, that's $4 million. If you've got 5 talents, he's just giving you nearly $10 million. So he's trusting you with something really big here. Now, the English translators, because we don't understand this thing, and some of them just can't seem to come out and say a Roman talent was 71 pounds of gold. Okay, they don't do that. So they try to give us something we can relate to, so you get all these different currencies and stuff and weights of silver and all that. No, it was 71 pounds of gold was a talent. All right? That was the original thing. Now, but the key thing isn't the exact amount. The key thing is that you understand this was a big amount of stuff that God was giving these guys, or that the master was giving these guys. And we're going to talk about that later. So the first law is God owns everything. I don't own anything. God owns it all. I'm just a steward. All right. Law number 2, the law of allocation. God has loaned me money. Now, we just talked about that. He's loaning it to you for maybe 30 or 50 or 70 or 100 years or a couple of weeks, But in that loan, you'll notice that everyone gets a different amount. Not everybody gets the same. I mean, it's obviously, we're not all equally wealthy here, right? We're not all equally wealthy. So we're not all equally of the same economic status. Some get more than others. Some get less than others. But there are no talent people. There's no people to whom God hasn't given resources. I mean, if you are breathing, that's a resource, right? That air is a resource. It's a blessing. If you're alive, that's a blessing. So everyone gets something, and God expects us to use whatever the something is He gives us. Now, all these guys begin to go out. Verses 16 and 18. The servant who'd received 5,000 coins, or if you're still like in the King James, 5 talents, went at once and invested his money and earned another 5,000. In the same way, the servant who had received 2,000 coins earned another 2,000. But the servant who had received 1,000 coins went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. 2 things we see here, all right? A, money is a tool to be used. It's just like a hammer. It's just like a screwdriver. It's like an arrow. It's whatever. You put it to work. The problem is we don't put it to work. Too often we put ourselves to work for it. See, God set it up so we use money, but we love people. If we get that backwards, we're in trouble. We start loving money, we're going to start using people. So money's a tool to use, all right? Next thing, B. We get to choose what we do with what God gives us. So God determines how much He gives us, but then He allows us to make the choices of what we do with it, because what we do with it is a test, and God is watching He's watching each of us to see how we handle the test. Verse 19. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. Listen, when you get to heaven someday, you're going to stand in front of God, and God is going to say, what did you do with all that I gave you? How did you invest those resources that I entrusted to you? How did you use those, my stuff, in my interest? How are you using this stuff? I mean, what all can you do with the money? Can you waste money? Oh, yeah, you can waste money. That's what QVC is for, right? You can actually sit on your couch and waste money with your cell phone right there. Okay? Yeah, there's plenty of ways to mess it. You can spend it. You can use it. You can hoard it. There's all kinds of ways where God will allow you to use your money the way you want to, but He tells you, do that, but understand this. Someday you've got to explain that purchase to me. You've got to tell me why that gizmo was more important than helping people who were in need. Oh, getting personal, huh? Right. Third law. One day God will audit me. That's what it means when it says, after a long time, the master came back and settled accounts. Listen, you think the IRS is thorough? Holy smokes. God has made an investment in you, and He's given you certain resources. He's given you certain abilities. He's given you certain opportunities. He's given you a certain heritage. He's given you certain freedoms. He's given you a certain amount of intellect. He's given you a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of life. And He's going to ask you, what did you do with all that stuff that I gave you? Well, God, I worked that stuff hard. I made a lot of money. I had a great business going. Put my kids through good school. I retired well, and I died with lots of stuff. You know what noise you're going to hear at that point? God's going to go, wrong answer. And He's going to say, do you think I actually gave you all that so you could live just for yourself? You know the bumper sticker? He who dies with the most toys wins. He who dies with the most toys still dies. Life's not about the acquisition of things, because we're not taking any of it with us. I used to say all the time, you never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul trailer. And then one day going to Muscatine, I'm telling you, I'm moving to Muscatine in about 2 weeks. No, just kidding. They've apparently figured something out down there that the rest of it haven't figured out yet. No, it all belongs to God, and God loans it to us, and He reclaims it and reloans it upon our death, and sometimes He does it even sooner. And He's watching what we do with our stuff, and one day we have to explain to Him why we did what we did with what we had. Romans 14:12. Yes, each of us will give a personal, what's that? Account to God. Listen, right now, America is reeling as a result of decades of overspending. I mean, it's ridiculous. And how the most blessed, the most prosperous, the wealthiest nation in the world can be on the edge of economic collapse is staggering. But it has happened. All you got to do is spend trillions of dollars you don't have and borrow it from kids who haven't even been born yet. But here's the deal. You cannot be irresponsible forever. There is a day of reckoning. And at some point, you have to man up and deal with it. Now, the day of reckoning came for these three servants in our story. The law of accountability says this. One day, God's going to say, what did you do with everything I resourced out to you? Now, notice these guys had three different responses. Verses 20 through 23, the first two servants. Now, I like it. They acknowledge, right? They acknowledge what you gave us. Right? So they acknowledge they were giving. They acknowledge it didn't belong to them. And they talk about what they did with it on behalf of the guy who gave them. Now the third guy's got a very different response. Verse 24. Then the servant who'd received 1,000 coins came in and said, Sir, I know that you are a hard man. What's he doing? He's blaming his lack of action on his boss. I know that you are a hard man. You reap harvest where you did not plant. You gather crops where you do not scatter seed. Where you did not scatter seed. I was what? Afraid. Circle the word afraid. We're going to come back to that. This is significant. I was afraid. So I went off and hid your money in the ground. Look, here's what belongs to you. You bad and lazy servant, his master said. You knew, did you, that I reap harvest where I did not plant, gather crops where I did not scatter seed? Well, then you should have deposited my money in the bank, or in our case, they're trying to make it work for us. The better paraphrase for this would be, you could have at least made a low-risk investment with some of it, but you didn't even do that. And I would have received it all back with interest when I returned. Now listen, we've got people who act just like that servant today. And what they do is this. They blame everybody else. They mess up their lives. And then they don't know what to do when the day of reckoning comes. And so they blame their parents, they blame their neighborhood, they blame the school they went to, they blame the college, they blame the government, they blame everybody else, and they get into trouble, and they say, why is God doing this to me? Listen, God did not grab that plastic out of your hands and swipe it. God never touched your plastic. That's part of the problem. God never got his hands on your plastic. God did not tell you to go buy a car you couldn't afford. God did not tell you you needed a bigger house to be better. He did not tell you that. Proverbs 19:3. People ruin their lives by their own what? Foolishness. Modern English, we would say stupidity. People ruin their lives by their own stupidity, and then they're angry at who? The Lord. Isn't that interesting? I've always found that interesting. If I go play Powerball and I scratch and I win $1 gazillion, then I say, man, I was so lucky today. But if I go out and I'm driving 45 and a 25 and I get a ticket, I say, why did God do that to me? Why wasn't God involved in Powerball? Because if he was, you have to give up some of it. Okay, now, number 4, the law of utilization. I must wisely use God's money, which, by the way, excludes Powerball, okay? The law of utilization, I must wisely use God's money. See, God expects me to use what I've got, not hoard it, not sit on it, not hide it, not bury it, not deny it. Money's a tool, and it's meant to be used. Now, this third guy, what's wrong with this third guy? I mean, he told us what was wrong. I had you circle the word. Remember what he said? He said, I'm afraid. Yeah, he operates from fear. So he operates from this nothing ventured, nothing gained, also nothing lost. So he just sits on it. And he takes what his master has given him, and he doesn't do anything with it. Now, did that upset the master? Yeah. Watch what he says, verse 26. You, what? Bad and lazy servant. Those words Jesus actually used, I'll even give you the Greek. It's poniros and okneros. And those words are actually better translated bad, wicked, vile, grievous, or we'd say slimy bottom sucker, I mean, that's kind of the thing we do with this guy. And these aren't words we would usually use for a bad expense. Oh, I overdrew my bank account this week, so I'm wicked, I'm grievous, I'm vile. No, we wouldn't do that, would we? We don't like to use that word for mismanagement. But what he's saying here, this is a serious sin. See, when we think of wicked or vile or grievous or those other things, we think of rape, we think of murder, we think of child abuse, we think of sex trafficking, we think of slavery, we think of any number of things. But God says, wait a minute. He says, Tony, anytime you misuse or you abuse resources I gave you, that's in direct opposition to what I've called you to do. That's in rebellion against what I have told you to do. That is the same sin that Satan committed in heaven and brought into the world. You need to take this seriously. It's a little more than just bad and lazy, isn't it? All right. Law number 5, the law of motivation. Success means moving against my fears. All right, that guy was afraid. Sometimes I got to move against my fears. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back. Listen, let me ask you, what is it that keeps you from investing your life? I mean, what is it that keeps you from starting right now, today, to move toward financial freedom? I'll tell you what it is. It's fear. See, one of the big challenges for us is that we don't want to look bad in the eyes of other people. It concerns us how we look at other people. We don't want to be caught wearing last year's fashion this year. We fear how others see us. Man, I saw this a lot when I was working with the Army at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. All my lieutenants wanted to dress and live like captains. All my captains wanted to dress and look like majors. All my majors wanted to dress and look like lieutenant colonels. All my lieutenant colonels wanted to dress and look like colonels. All the colonels wanted to dress and look like retired generals. Okay? They just wanted to skip it and just go straight to the end. And the problem is none of them were making the money that went with what they were trying to look like. And so they were always in the hole. They were always upside down. They were always bankrupt because they were worried about what other people thought about them. Proverbs 29:25. The fear of human opinion does what? Disables. It makes you unable to make a decent choice. It disables your decision-making piece. Trusting in God protects you from that. See, if you obsess what other people think about you all through your life, you will never be a success because you have just now made the number one goal of your life to avoid failure. And avoiding failure as your goal does not give you success. It also misunderstands failure. Failure doesn't have to be permanent, folks. Failure is not permanent unless you choose to make it permanent. One of my favorite stories about failure involves 2 disciples. This is right at the end of Jesus' ministry. And if you're doing the life group reading, you're probably reading this right now or soon will be. You got 2 disciples, Judas and Peter, and they are both going to betray Jesus on the same night. All right, so they've got the same sin, little different method, but the same sin. And so they commit the same sin, but the difference that sets them apart is how they reacted to their failure. After Judas betrays Jesus, Judas goes out, has a pity party, and hangs one on. Yeah, he went out and he hung himself. He committed suicide. All right? Now, Peter realizes what he's done. What does Peter do? Peter is sorry for what he's done. He repents. He turns to God. He asks for forgiveness. And because of that, Peter, the biggest remaining failure in the 12, is the guy that Jesus chooses 40 days after the resurrection to stand and preach to thousands of people to initiate the birth of the church. And he preaches to thousands of people. And that day, 3,000 people are baptized. Jesus chose the biggest failure to be the biggest spokesman of the church. Now, let me tell you something. You are not going to get out of debt overnight. I mean, unless a rich relative dies and leaves you lots of money. All right? But the problem with that is most people who have that happen are back in debt again shortly. Right? So you're not going to get out of debt overnight. And by the way, you didn't get into debt overnight generally, unless you went to the boat. Okay? One of these principles that we're going to look at over the next few weeks is called the little by little principle. And it's kind of like losing weight. Do you lose 40 pounds in one day? Not in a pleasant way, no. Okay? No. All right? You lose weight like you gain it a little bit each day. And I'm going to tell you, you can start now losing your debt just like you gained it. Lose it a little bit each day. And if you'll stick with us, over the next 5 or 6 weeks as we go through this, we're going to help you get clear of all that stuff that's tying you down. All right? Law number 6, use it or lose it. Use it or lose it. It's the law of application. You're supposed to use it. If you don't use it, you lose it. Verse 28. Then he ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one with the 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Listen, this is the principle of the universe, and this one you just can't deny. If you don't lose it, you use it, right? I mean, if you don't exercise, you lose muscle. If I refuse to think, I lose my mind, It's just how it works. If I refuse to practice some talent that I have, I will lose it. It will go away. If you don't use it, you lose it. This is so key because God has the right to take away any resource He has given to you that you refuse to use and develop because it's still His. And He put it out to be used. Now, there's a flip side to this that's good. If I do use it wisely, what happens? He'll give me more to use. Yeah, He'll trust me with it. He'll trust me with more resources. It's the law of the harvest. And we'll get to this one a little bit later too. When you sow a seed, you don't get one seed back. We grew sweet corn in our backyard this year. And I don't remember how many kernels we planted now. Probably planted 50, 60 kernels, something like that. And at the end of the harvest, at the end of the year we had 45 big, juicy ears of sweet corn. Now, was there one kernel on each ear? No, there were hundreds on each ear. So we planted a handful and got back hundreds. That's the law of the harvest. You always get back more than you sow. So you use it or you lose it. If you use it, you get back more than you start with. All right. Last law, number 7, the law of compensation. God's going to reward me for good money management. Now, a lot of us, we say, but, there's more ways that I can serve God and honor God than just money. Yeah, there is. But money's the acid test. Money's the big test. It's the bigger test than what you do with your time. I mean, God uses money to test your life more than anything else in your life. Why? Because it's the one thing we spend our lives trying to earn. Now, I love this passage because there are some rewards God gives for wise money management. All right, Matthew 25, verse 21. This is what He says to the first servant. Now watch the rewards that pop up in this. And we'll come back and we'll lay them out here in just a second. The master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount. So now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. All right, here's what He says to the second servant. The master said, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount. You hearing an echo? You realize, as far as the master is concerned, he's given small amounts. So the one guy he gave $10 million to, he considers that a small amount. Why? Because the master has a lot more resources available. What we think is a lot, God doesn't think is a lot. You've been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate this together. Now, I love this progression. Have you got those words? Can you bring those words up on there for me, David? There we go. All right. There's 3 rewards that come. You can add these to your note there at the bottom of that column. First thing he says, the first reward he's going to give us is affirmation. He says, well done, my good and faithful servant. Doesn't it feel good when someone you're working for says, wow, that is awesome? Yeah, He's going to do that for us. All right. The second reward He's going to give us there is promotion. Promotion. He says, you've been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. So He says, you know what? You did so well with that little stuff. I'm going to give you a promotion. We're getting you out of that little cubicle over there. We're putting you in a corner office over here. You're going to get to work more, do more stuff. All right. Then the third reward is celebration. The master says, let's celebrate together. He says, you've done so well. Let's have a party, man. This is awesome. See, money's the acid test of how much you trust God. And that's why we're going to spend several weeks on this thing. Not just how to get you out of debt, but we want to help you to learn to trust God more. Now watch this from Luke 16. If you're faithful in little things, you'll be faithful in large ones. But if you're dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. You know, I always think about this story when I read this passage. When Steph and I were first married, we were dirt poor. Actually, dirt would have been an upgrade. I mean, we were on the stuff underneath the dirt, and we were living way below the poverty line, working at a church in Indiana. And it's a church where I had agreed to go work right out of college. And I had told them, hey, they say, what do you need to live on? And I said, well, you know, whatever you pay a junior high teacher, well, I can probably get by on that. Well, I forgot that junior high teachers have benefits that are not included in their salary. And so I got the salary without the benefits, which was awesome. So I agreed to go there for $17,000 a year. So then the chairman of the elders calls me a week later and says, hey, we don't think we can afford $17,000. Can you come for $15,000? And I said, you know what? God's not going to let me starve. And by the way, God did not let me starve. I've never eaten as well as what I ate. Now, if it was meat, I had to kill it, catch it, or hook it, you know. But, man, we ate good. So I said, yeah, I'll come for $15,000. 2 weeks later, I get a letter from the church the day I graduate from college announcing that I have agreed to come for $13,000, which I hadn't. And when I got there, they actually paid me $11,000. Oh, yeah. Oh, the best part, the H&R Block guy refused to charge me for my taxes. He actually asked me, he goes, do you have a copy of your vow? And I'm like, what, from my marriage? You know, because I just gotten married, you know, the year before. And so from my marriage? And he goes, no, your vow of poverty. And I said, what is that? And he goes, oh, God. So I knew it had something to do with prayer. I just wasn't sure. But I went to our local bank there was in trouble, and we kind of all knew it, but we didn't know it when we moved there, when we put our money in there, and they ended up basically losing some of our money. And I had two of their tellers who attended our church, and I had them go through all of our statements. And they go, yeah, both of them independently came up, yeah, the bank owes you $180. And so I took my book up there, and I had to pay somebody $10 to go through it. And she goes, well, there's $180 missing, but I can't tell where it is. But I don't think that's our mistake. And so she takes my register and draws an X through it and writes the new balance in and gives me back the book. Yeah. Well, there's a guy sitting right beside me who's just moving to town. And he's going to open up a bank account, and he walks up and he goes, did you just rip this kid off from $180? And she goes, we didn't rip him off. There's just an error that he's made in his accounting. And he goes, I saw you go through the bank statements. You said there's an error there, but it's not in the bank statements. And she goes, well, we don't know. I don't know what it is, but I have the authority to do this, so we're just going to make it balance zero. And so I thought, oh, great. And so this guy, he says, well, he goes, I'm here to open a new account. And she goes, well, pull up a chair. And he goes, I want to show you my check. So he shows her a cashier's check for over $500,000. He just sold a logging company. And so she goes, oh, well, we can do that. And he goes, no, you can't. Well, he didn't say it like that. He basically said, no, you can't. And he took it back, and he goes, if you'll rip off this kid of $180, you're not going to get any of mine. So he turns and he looks at me, and he goes, where are we going to go bank? I said, I don't know, man. And he goes, wipe out his account and give him what you owe him. And so she did it right there. And so we went to a different bank, and I opened up an account with him. So it's kind of cool. Definitely helps when you have somebody who understands how that works. He says if you're untrustworthy about worldly wealth, in other words, if you're always in debt, if you never have any to share, if you don't cut any slack, if you have no margin, and you're always panicked, and it's always forever check to check, who will trust you with true riches? And if you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with the things of your own? No one can serve. Now, here's where it comes down to the bottom line. This is where he cuts to the chase, verse 13. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and Capital One, Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. Insert your owner there. Listen, you're going to have to decide today. I want to encourage you to do it today. You're going to have to decide today what's going to be number one in your life. God or your money. You say, well, I wish money was number one in my life, but I don't have any of it. All I got is debt. Okay. So what's going to be number one in your life? God or your debt? I mean, you can only have number one in your life. Whatever you choose to focus on, whatever you choose to follow, whatever you choose to service, whatever you choose to have be number one is God in your life. Money's a terrific servant, but I got to tell you, it is a horrible master. Let's make some changes. Would you bow your heads with me? If God did an audit in your life right now on your finances, what grade would He give you? A, B, C, D, F? F minus minus? I mean, whatever it is, my goal is over the next few weeks to help you move up on that scale, because this issue is an eternal issue. I mean, if you're not faithful in your money management, then God can't trust you with the really valuable stuff in life. And listen, I want you to have good jobs. I want you to have good roles. I want you to have good responsibility. I also want you to have good rewards in heaven. And as your pastor, I'm praying for you. I'm praying that you're going to learn these principles and you're going to apply them, not just so that you can get out of debt, but because I want you to succeed. I want you to be able to be available to God when He calls you to serve. I want you to prosper, but even more than that, I want you to be who God made you to be. And as long as someone other than God owns all your attention and all your effort, you never can. You know, unmanaged finances are simply a symptom of an unmanaged life. And what you need is a new life manager. His name's Jesus Christ, and that's what it means to make Jesus the Lord of your life. It means that you say, okay, I'm gonna yield to Him, I'm gonna serve Him. Everything's gonna come over to whatever His company policy is, what His operating procedures are, they are going to be mine. And it means you put your life under the new management and under the new rules. Father, today we ask to have Jesus Christ become the new manager of our lives. Father, some of us have asked this before, but we've never allowed it to happen. From this day forward, Father, we want to begin to shift everything in alignment with what your word says. We want to follow your will. We want to follow your way. And Father, by that, we want to honor you by being able to return to you a better investment than what you gave us to start with. Father, help us to function from confidence in you, not from avoiding failure. Father, help us to function from a perspective that wants to be all that you created us to be, not from one that wants us to be like everybody else, even at the cost of everything. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.